is Wes. Welcome to the second video in Chapter 2. In this video, we're going to dive into the user interface and we're going to specifically take a look at the project browser and its inspector as well as the hierarchy view. Okay, so we're going to be concentrating here on the project view. Now, before we actually dive into this, just real quick, what I want to say at the top of the UI, if we come over to this Windows tab, I'm just going to left click, and what I want to point out is what we're going to be covering in Chapter 2 are all these different views here. So if we kind of look starting here at scene and we kind of go all the way down to console, this is basically going to make up all of the UI views. Also, one other thing just to point out here is we've got layout. So by default, I'm working in the default layout. So if I just click this guy, Unity will arrange itself in the default layout. So if you're not seeing, or if your user interface doesn't look like mine, then what you can do is just go to Window and do Layouts and change the default. We can also change to a couple or save our own if we want to. So without getting too crazy about the interface just yet, what you can do is each one of these little tabs here is what's considered a view. So when we come over here to Window, you can see that that's what we're going to be talking about here. Each one of these guys are views. And what I can do is I can just left click, drag and drop these guys anywhere I want. So it's kind of neat that you can actually just make the interface very pliable, and you can change this however you want. So if you want to do like a game view and a scene view this way, you can just left click, drag any of these tabs and place them just anywhere. So I'm still just left click dragging. You can see that this view will snap to different locations. So let's just say, let's go ahead and just go back to Window, Layouts Default. And once I've kind of arranged the UI that I want, I can just simply go to Window, Layouts, and I can save this layout. And it'll show up here within this top portion here of your custom layout. Okay, so now continuing on, we know what a view is, so it's any one of these tabs, and we're going to be talking about the project view. So we did talk about how a Unity project works in Chapter 1, and we touched just a little bit on, or at least we had a video that kind of showed some of this in action. So now we're actually just going to talk about, how to actually view things in the project view. So if we take a look at this guy, by default, he's split into two columns here. So we've got a left and a right column. And the left column is basically working in a hierarchical view, and then the right column is more of this kind of like exploded out view here. So we can basically just see things just like we can see the folders and everything that's in here. So we've got two categories. At the top we've got this favorites. So if I click the little drop down view, you can see we got favorites, and we've got a couple favorites here. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then we have our assets. So as we mentioned in Chapter 1, every Unity project you create is going to have an assets folder, and that's where all of your project assets go. So let's just click this little arrow here, this little drop down arrow, and you can see that it expands all the projects. And by default, I am working in the Angry Bots, which is the free demo that comes with Unity 4. So if you just downloaded this guy, you should have Angry Bots as an example project. So if we take a look at the assets folder, you can see that on the left side, like I said before, it's a hierarchical view, and we can see that each one of these folders. So what I want to bring to your attention is as I click on one of these folders, let's say that we look at materials here, you can see over in the right view, here, let's do this. Let's go and look at something that shows some content. Let's look at objects. So if we come over here to objects, you can see that objects definitely have some content inside of this folder because it has this little arrow. And so with this objects folder selected on the right hand side, we actually see what's inside of this folder. And so what's inside of it at kind of like a default level is just another bunch of folders. If we were to click this drop down arrow, let's just close that guy up, you can see that these same folders exist in this hierarchical view. And then here you can see them in more of like a grid pattern here. So we've got the same folders. Let's say that we want to go into our enemies folder. So two ways we can navigate this guy if we want to. We can just click the enemies folder, and then our right hand view is going to show us everything that's inside of that folder. So this two column view is kind of nice. It allows you to select something over here, like basically the item that you want to navigate on, and the right hand view will actually show you what's inside of that folder. And at the very top of this bar, you can see that we have a little breadcrumb trail. And this guy kind of shows us where we've been. And we can also click on this. So right now you can see that enemies here is a little bit more bold than assets and objects. But if I want to go back to objects, I can also just click this guy here, and that's going to send me back as well. So let's just say here you can see that in the left side view here, we see that we've got this little gray bar around the objects folder, so that kind of shows us where we are. I can also just double click into these guys and move into them this way. So let's say that I want to go and look at what's in the lab equipment. All I've got to do is just left click this folder, and you can see that we go into that folder. So what's happening on the left-hand side, you can see that all the folders are expanding to kind of show where we are. So again, we have our breadcrumb trail. We also have, we're able to navigate inside this right view, and then inside of our inspector view over here, inside of our project view, you can see that our hierarchy view was also updating to show where we've been and everything. So you've got several different ways that you can kind of navigate in this guy. Like I said, you can really just kind of click and go through these guys. If you want to, you can just double click to just get where you want to go. So this one's more of a direct way. So it's like if you select something and you can say, okay, I've selected environment. Now I want to go look at rocks, and I want to go look at the materials, and you can kind of select through that way. Or you can take more of like a hierarchical approach. Where you can say, well, let's see, I want to look at objects, environments, let's go to rocks, let's drop down rocks, let's look at materials. And you can do most of your selection in this left-hand view, and then just let the right-hand view just basically update with the actual content that's in that directory that you're looking for. I tend to kind of just use this hierarchical view here as I go through, because I'm just kind of used to this more of just kind of dropping down like this. But it's kind of nice that you have both options there. So let's just go into another folder. Let's just say that we are in textures here. So let's just go into our textures folder. And we've got some more content, so here I'm just going to click that drop down arrow, and still kind of looking here what we have in this guy. So we've got a bunch of textures in here. So something else, you can see that everything's kind of small, and like I said before, it's kind of in this grid-based layout here. But at the bottom of the UI, you can see that we've got this little slider widget, and if we just left-click and drag on this guy, we can increase and decrease our size. So by default, we're not seeing everything, so we can use the scroll bar here to kind of move through and see all of the content that's inside of that textures folder. Or we could just move this slider bar back here, and we can just kind of make everything a lot smaller so it all fits within this window. Now, something else that you can do is you can move this slider bar all the way to the left, and what that does is then just gets rid of that grid view and then puts us more into this list view as well. Again, I tend to probably look at this view a little bit more. So now we can see everything in a list view. Everything is in alphabetical order. It's just a little bit easier to get to. The only thing that you kind of miss is if you had this up in all the way to the right and kind of had in this maximum view, you can kind of see these textures. However, as you can see here, that some of these textures are real small, and I really can't tell what these guys are anyway. So what I'll do is, like I said, is I move this all the way into the list view, and then as I click through my textures, here again, you can also move any of these windows around. You can see that as I kind of move my cursor over, I kind of get this I-beam. If I just left click and drag, I can actually just move the UI. So what I'm going to do is just expand this inspector view. So again, remember it's a tab, so it's a view. Then I'm going to come over to this preview window, just left click and drag on this guy and expand that out. So as we start to kind of just move through these images, like I said, I like to keep it in this list view, and as I click on these guys, I'm using the actual browser, the project browser's inspector view, which we're going to talk about here in just a moment. We can see that its preview window, this is a much better way to kind of preview your textures. So this is the kind of way that I work. I navigate mainly through my list view. So let's say I want to look at explosions here. I want to look at some textures for these explosions. I kind of keep this guy, so again my slider's all the way over to the left, and now I can kind of say, okay, well here's what the electric ball looks like. Let's look at my muzzle flash, and then I can kind of see what I'm doing here, and then I can kind of scroll through each one of these textures, and I kind of get a nice, a better view of what's going on here in this preview window. So one thing to mention about this two-column view is this is actually new in Unity 4, and previous versions of Unity didn't operate this way. So what you can do, let's just say that you just do not like this kind of layout. So what you can do is you can come up over here to, there's this little like drop-down arrow with these little bar stacks here. If you just left-click this guy, you can see that you get a couple options. Now you'll see this everywhere in the user interface. So every single tab is going to have this guy, and it gives you a couple options. You can maximize, you can close the tab, or you can add a new tab. And again, remember, see, each one of these guys is going to correlate to what we see appear in our window. But in the project browser, we have a new option which says we got a two-column layout. We can actually switch this to a one-column layout. So this is what you actually would see from previous versions of Unity. So you don't get that two layout, but what you can do is you just old school navigation here. You want to look at animations, click the drop down arrow, and now you're going through and looking at your animations and things like that. So you can utilize this. Don't really use this much anymore. I do keep this on the two-column layout. So here we'll go back to that setup. So one last thing that I want to talk about before we move on to the project inspector is the ability to utilize these favorites and being able to use this search bar. So let's just go ahead and take a look at what these favorites do. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on this all models. And so what's going on here is we're viewing everything in our project that's a model. So let's go over to this slider widget here and just left click and drag and slide this guy over so we're looking at this in list view. See, it's a little bit easier to look at. And as I kind of just scroll through this, you can see that these are all objects or assets within this Unity project that are of a model type. So basically, if you think about it, favorites are really just these tags, or they're these filters, and allow you to filter the selection that you want to look at. So we just want to look at everything that's a model in this project. We can do that. And you can see that our breadcrumb trail is now changed a bit, so it's got a search, and it's saying I'm searching the assets section here, this assets folder, in everything that we're looking at here. And so again, if we go into scripts, so here we'll select scripts. This is all the scripts. If we do prefabs, these are all the prefabricated elements, models again, and then materials. So by default, we've got a couple of these broad sections here that we can actually just quickly search through. And so here, we'll go back to models, and I'm just going to, again, go into list view here, and we can see that this assets here is selected or basically highlighted for us. And you can see that saying, hey, I'm searching inside the assets folder. We also have a section here where we can actually check the asset store. So if I just left click this guy, what this is going to do, it's going to go out to the Unity asset store and it's going to look at all model assets. Now by default this is a very broad search, so we're looking at 999 plus objects, but you can see we got some free assets here and some paid assets. So just really quickly, we're not going to go into the asset store real quick, but I just want to show you if we go up to our window and go to the asset store, which again is just another view. The asset store is a store where you can buy all kinds of prefabricated elements and scripts and materials and textures and you know, components and things like that you can purchase for your game. Now all of this content's created by other Unity members, and there's some really fantastic stuff on this. I don't use any Unity project without using some type of component from the Unity asset store. So we'll cover this a bit more in a later video. So I'm going to close it out for now, but really what I bring your attention to is if you select that asset store button, you can actually do a search of the asset store directly right here into your project browser, which is pretty cool. So here, now we'll just left click and go back to our assets folder. So here we are, we're looking at our favorites. We know that we have all models. What I want to bring your attention to is right up here in this search bar. You can see that I can click in this guy and I can actually search for this. Now if we kind of look at this, you can see that this has a T colon model. So what that T stands for is for tag. So anything that's tagged as a model is what we're looking at here, and so that's how this favorite works. So yes, it's a filter, but it's also really just a tag. So anything that's tagged as a model type element, I'm going to display that for you when you click on your favorites here. Now we don't actually have to use favorites, so we could do this on our own. So let's just say we go into this I-beam section here, and the search view, and we just left click and we just start to type something. So let's just type in material. So as I start to type in material, you can see that inside the search, as we're looking in our in our assets folder, which is here, and then we can also looking at, we've got 60 or well, still this is a very broad search, but we're looking at again 999 plus objects here in our asset store. But if we want to really concentrate, and what you'll really mainly use this for is for this here. We'll really look at our assets folder. So you can see that I started to type material, and what I have here is this. I got a couple of materials are showing up. I've got this is actually picking everything. So even though I have a couple materials that are showing up here, I also have this this script here. So this is a script. I know this because it's got this little JS, so meaning JavaScript icon. So if I click on this guy, you can see that over in our inspector, it's giving us a preview of what that script looks like. Same thing with the material. So if I select on any of these guys, you can see that our project inspector is actually showing us a preview of that. So I'll scroll through and you can see that I've got a lot of folders here called materials. And as I select these guys down here at the bottom, it's telling us where these are. So prefabs, player materials. This guy's in the objects, environment, doors materials. This guy's here is in the objects, environments, pipes materials, and so on. And then we have some, again, another material that's down here. So we can actually search through things for this. So let's just say that, let's go into the objects here and let's find something very specific in this project. So let's go into the player. Let's see muzzle flash. Let's see if we can find that. So here we'll go back up just to the root level here, the asset store, and we'll type in muzzle flash. So as I really get specific with this guy, you can see that our results are going to be a lot more specific. So what we have here is a couple items. We've got an object, we've got a material. Here's another object. This actually is a prefab, it looks like, and then we've got some materials, and then we also have a script. So in this entire assets folder, by just clicking here muzzle flash, we can see that we've got a couple of these guys. Also, if we take a look at our asset store, you can see that we're looking at there's 14 of 648 of these guys, 14 of 658 of these guys here in our asset store, which is pretty cool. So if we click on this, you can see that this is going to show us some interesting things here in our asset store. So we've got some free assets. We can drop this guy up here, this little drop down arrow, and then we've got some paid assets that we can look at. We've got more. If you click the more button here, it's going to show you some more information. But again, you're mainly going to use this function here for the assets. So we can see that we were able to filter that for us. So as I mentioned earlier, that when we type something into our search field, it's going to return everything that's basically related to the actual text of this. So we've got muzzle flash, but it's actually returned to us something that is a type of a model, a type material, or even a type of script. And so we can actually refine this even further by using these little buttons over here. So if we kind of hover over to this button, it's going to say that let's do a search by type and let's do a search by label. So let's do muzzle flash and do a search by type. So if I just left click this guy, I kind of get this pop-up box here, and this is going to show us all the different types of components or game object types that we can use within Unity. So let's just do model. And so now that I actually do model here, you can see that we put this little T colon by here, and again, this T means type. I may have actually said tag earlier, but it's actually just talking about the tag, the type of this search field that I want to do. So we've got muzzle flash type model, and it's just showing this model here. If we were to do prefab, we can see that we got two prefabs in this scene. We could do a script. We can see that we've got a script. So it lets you to refine that even further. So if we want to, we can just come in and clear this guy out here. So now you can see that we're returning all of our results again. We've got another guy over here that's actually called label. And so if we just left click on this guy, you can see that there's several types of labels. Let's just talk about that just in a second. So for now, let's just skip over the label and let's go right over here to our favorites. So what we can do with our favorites is we can actually just click this and we can say new save search. So this is how we create our own favorites. And let's say that muzzle flash is something that I really want to work with a lot in our project, I guess. So we'll say muzzle flash and we'll just save this guy. So now as I'm looking through, if I want to get to that muzzle flash search really quickly, I can just click this guy. Now you can see that that search is going to be saved for me. So it's a real quick way. If you have a certain amount of assets that you're going to use or you need to be able to locate often, you can do that. You can actually just save yourself a favorite by actually creating a search. You can even filter that search. So let's just say we wanted to do muzzle flash, and I want to say give me only the prefabs. So now I've got muzzle flash prefabs. Let's save this guy. We're going to overwrite the filter because I've got this guy selected. So let's overwrite this guy. So now what I'm doing is I'm looking at only my muzzle flash prefabs. If I wanted to create another one, let's see, we could just come down and do let's do a search for this again. So muzzle flash. Here's all of muzzle flash elements. Let's just save this guy as blank here. So we'll call this muzzle flash. Muzzle flash all. And then let's just what I'm going to do is I want to rename this guy. Just click it once. Just left click one more time. Then it gives you an editable field, and we can call this one prefabs. So here's a way that we can say, well, here's all of my muzzle flash elements. Here's just my prefabs that I want to work with. So that's how you can really start to create yourself some custom favorite selections here, so you can get to your objects real quickly, especially as your project grows and gets bigger and bigger. This may be something that you want to do. So the last thing we're going to cover in this video is the inspector view. So if we come up to the window, you can see that inspector is one of our main user interface views. And this inspector view is basically context sensitive, so it's going to change depending on what we're actually working on. And so I like to refer to this as the game inspector, or the hierarchy inspector, or the project inspector. And so if we're into the project window here and we start to select some of these guys, you can see that this inspector is changing. It's giving us some information about this object that we're selecting at the project level. If we were to come up to our hierarchy view and select something, this this inspector is now changing because it's basically giving us the properties of what's going on for this object I select that's actually in game here, that's actually in our game hierarchy or our scene view. And we'll talk about all that just a bit, but what we really want to concentrate on is the project inspector. So let's just go back to into our project and say we're looking at this muzzle flash. Let's do muzzle flash all, and let's actually go and look at an object here. Okay, so what we have is our muzzle flash. We're looking at an object, and our inspector view is giving us some information about this guy. So we have this preview window, and we showed that before when we were taking a look at textures. So let's just scroll down here real quick and try to find ourselves a texture. So here's this cliff rock. So remember before, as we were looking through, we could see that we could use this preview window to kind of view our textures. And the preview window is going to give us a little bit of information about things. So obviously it gives us a visual representation of what that asset looks like. At the bottom here, in terms of textures, it kind of gives us some information that this is a 512 by 512 texture. It's an RGBA, and it's compressed with this level of compression. It also tells us what the size is. So in this case, this texture is 341.4 kilobytes. We can also just click a couple buttons here. Here it is. We can turn the color off and look at our gray values on this guy, and we can actually this value here is actually showing us our bitmaps. Now this is something we won't really talk about in this video. But bitmaps are used in games to help with performance of your game. So as we kind of scroll through this guy, you can see that it's showing the different levels of bitmaps. So again, don't worry about that, but just letting you know that control is there. So we've got our preview window. At the top, you can see that we've got some more information about this texture. So we can see it's what texture type is it. So if we just click this drop down, you can see that it's a texture. Is it a normal map? Is it a light map? That kind of stuff. We got wrap modes that we can set on this guy and filter modes. So how's this texture being filtered? And then we also down here we have our default size. So we've got our max size is 1024. What type of format is it's compressed? Is it 16-bit? Is it true color? Those kind of things. And then also we have our different formats. So as we kind of look, if you kind of think about this bottom area here is mainly going to be handling compression and texture size. So these are all of the different type of outputs we can do. So this is looking at our web. This is looking at standalone. This is iPhone, Android. So we can actually set this texture to be different compressions and sizes depending on what platform that we're actually working on. So for now, we're just going to leave this at default. So one other thing I just kind of want to show you about how this inspector view changes depending on what you're selecting. So for instance, we have this texture, and so we've got this view. If we're looking at our texture views, then we can see that we've kind of got this, and this is something that Unity does very well. It just kind of presents you with the information that you need to get to the quickest. So right now we can see that, okay, well, it's a texture. Here's our wrap mode. Here's our filtering. These are the main things that you're going to probably work with. But let's just say that and here's our texture sizes and our format, but let's say that, I actually want a little bit more information than this. What I can do is I can change this from texture to advanced. And then what this is going to do is give us all kinds of extra information. So now you can see that we've got generate bitmaps, just all kinds of crazy stuff that we may not want to do. Is it alpha from grayscale? Are we going to bypass sRGB? Is it read-write enabled? Is it in linear space? A lot of stuff that we probably wouldn't even mess with. But the reason why I would typically kind of change this to advanced is that you can now actually take a look at the compression schemes a little bit better. So you can see that, well, I'm actually want to compress this as an RGBA compressed DXT5. Or maybe I want to do an RGB24 or an RGB26, or 16-bit, things like that. So that's just something to keep in mind. So for now, we'll just take this back to texture. And so as I said before, it changes depending on what we want to do. So let's use our search here. So let's go to model, and let's see. Let's just use our favorites here. Let's go to all models, and let's just select a model. Let's look at this construction guy here. And actually, what it's doing here is I made a bunch of changes in my import inspector here. For that texture. So I was changing stuff, and this is saying, hey, you've changed some stuff on that setting. Do you want to apply these or just revert these guys? And it's telling me what I was actually working with. So in this case, I'm just going to revert, meaning don't do anything. So here we have an actual model, and you can see that our inspector, so we get a lot of different information here at the top, but we still kind of get some things that are familiar, like this preview window. So in this preview window here, I've got a little 3D model here. I can actually left click and kind of rotate this guy around and just kind of look at what this 3D model looks like. Let's look at this. Here's a bullet. Let's look at something a little. Here's a catwalk. All right, so here's this little catwalk piece. This is a model piece that's inside this game here. And so I've got this guy selected, and then again, we won't go through all these different aspects here for these things, but as you can see that we've got this guy changed so that it's actually showing me all the import settings that relate to models. Just as before, when we clicked on that texture, it showed us everything that related to texture. So what we really want to do is, before we really concentrate too much on all these kind of settings and things like that in this project browser video, we want to just go back and cover that one last thing, which was the labels. So we had mentioned before, if we come back to the search view and we click on this labels button, you can see that there's a couple labels in this project. And so that's something else that you can do. So we have this catwalk guy, we have this preview window, and we can see that we have this catwalk object. What we can do is we can actually associate different labels with our group, with assets in our project. So if it's kind of cryptic a little bit, but if we kind of look at this bottom right hand view, there's this little blue button here. If we click on this blue button, this is going to show us the labels in our project. And so again, if we kind of click over to this guy, you can see that here's the labels. So it's the same view. It's getting a little cut off in this video here, but what I can do is I can actually start to create a new label for us. And so I think what I'll try to do is let's just pull our UI up a little bit here so you can kind of see what's going on here. So I'm going to click this little label button here, and now you can see here's our labels. Let's just say that I wanted to pick up or start to create something called environment. So in this view, I'm going to search. Here's environment, so I'm going to click this guy, and as soon as I click environment, you can see that environment shows up. So let's just do environment, and let's just do let's see, we'll call this catwalk here. So we say, and then I start to type in catwalk. Now there isn't any type of tag associated with that, or excuse me, a label associated with that. So you can see that nothing's showing up, and now I can add a new tag, excuse me, a label. So I'm going to hit enter on that. So I've actually labeled this guy with catwalk and environment. Maybe we could do one more and say metal. Let's see if metal shows up. Yeah, there is a metal tag, so let's just go ahead and just use the metal tag. So you now can see that I have catwalk, environment, and metal. So I've got 3 labels associated with this guy. So what we can do now is start to search this guy. So let's say that we're looking at our models and we actually want to use labels. So let's go and take a look at some of our labels here that we're going to be using. And so let's just do metal label. So here's our metal, and if we take a look at this guy, we can see that I want to look at all models. So we've got that little T there, meaning by type model, and then we have this little L here, L colon, meaning by label. So we're going to filter our selection through all models and anything that has a label of metal. So you can see that a catwalk here has shown up because we've actually have a label here associated with that guy of metal. So, it's, I don't know how much you use. Honestly, I don't really use labels so much in my project. Where this would really come into play is if you are not just working on a project by yourself. If you're on an entire team of people and, and you're working on this would be a very powerful type way to work. But personally, I don't ever do this when I'm just working for myself. So that's going to kind of cover everything. This was kind of an exhausting chapter here. We went very thoroughly through the project browser. We discussed how we can search for things. We also talked about how we can filter things using types and labels, how we could create new favorites, and then we also took a look at how the project inspector works. We talked about how some of the settings are context sensitive depending on what type of object that we're working with, and then we also took a look at how the preview system works, and then finally we figured out how we can actually assign labels to our objects.